The name Danielle Hunter came up earlier on the radio show with NFL free agency approaching. Welcome back. Yours truly, Paul Allen, at iHeart Radio sister station, 850 KOA. It's a KOA. It's a heritage station. Been around forever. It's OG as Marconi's game goes. And once again, thanks to not only Nordo for hooking it up back at FM 100.3 KFAN, but to Shannon Scott and Chad Bauer here with KOA, along with Brandon Krisztal, a reporter and host who will join us in the penultimate segment of today's show, because we couldn't do it without them. So thank you very much. And with that Danielle Hunter conversation, it's not like, I'm staring longingly at Rocky Mountains or ceiling fans thinking about Deshaun Watson's contract, Danielle Hunter's lot in life with the Minnesota Vikings. But, the closer we get to free agency, the more, I and we are going to think about this because Danielle's coming off a season where at one point, it had some defensive MVP to it and with all the sacks and, his for my taste and, those who are new to the covenant, so therefore maybe they haven't, seen all of Danielle's games, all of his career. But, the right people were telling me during the season that this is the best Danielle has ever played against the run. And that, that matters. So that, that was a 1 in 20 where Danielle smartly, he and his representation, were able to finagle their way or get the team to acquiesce to not being able to put the franchise tag on him. So that bravo for them. I mean, that's very key in this equation because I believe it's going to be more than $20 million a year on the average. And, so when you're starting to think about the who, what, where, when, and why of Minnesota Vikings football, and Danielle Hunter is one of the first and foremost or second and second when it comes to thinking of certain names and moving forward. But what really triggered me on this is YA and young Alec Lewis from The Athletic when he stopped by 9 to noon, I think it was last Thursday. And, we're talking about Danielle a little bit, and I stick by, what I say. I don't know if it's going to happen, but the Chicago Bears and Detroit Lions would be fools to not try to run down Danielle Hunter, given the money they have to spend on a player like that. Specifically, the Lions, who they're on the doorstep of destiny, man. I mean, that's a team that's on the doorstep of getting to the Super Bowl. So you put the division rivals to the side, and YA said just out of nowhere, Jacksonville, and I had heard that too. But, he was emphatic. And so then you look at the Jaguars and they have money. They have this Josh Allen cat, and I think they got to work something out with him contractually. But then they got this Trayvon Walker, who was taken like first, second, or third, I think in the 2022 draft or something. He had like 10 and a half, 11 sacks. He's really good. And offensively, with the way they run it with Etienne, and Lawrence, I don't think Trevor Lawrence's career has exactly worked out how they thought it would, given how high they took him. But, Christian Kirk has turned into a really, really good football player and worth every dollar that came his way. And I say that because there were a lot of national people who kind of mocked the Jags for the deal that Christian Kirk got. And now with Peterson as the coach, you got the offensive part getting mostly squared away, but they got some firepower. But the identity of this team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, is becoming that of defense, especially if they flirt with Danielle Hunter. So when YA dropped that last week, it's something that I thought about, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And Danielle he's in the second part of his career. So, when it comes to thinking about older players or, like age discrimination against players and they won't bring them in because of their age and stuff like that. Cousins is going to be 36 this next season. I think there's going to be a good market for him. But when you are in my stead tomorrow, if you happen to have Mike Florio on the radio show, he wrote a story. It might have been Friday. I saved it in the email and sent it to you simply because I just, it doesn't require a lot of talking out right now. But, from this ProFootballTalk.com story, Federal law, along with the laws of most, if not all states, prohibit discrimination against age. The protection begins at the age of 40. But obviously, the temptation to discriminate can get stronger as 40 dips farther and farther into the rearview mirror. In the 22-plus years we've been operating this specific media outlet, that'd be PFT, there have been multiple examples of possible ageism. Often, it happens with lower-profile jobs like scouting. Given the latest hiring cycle for head coaches, it's fair to ask whether there's a bias against older head coaches. Then he writes, 2 of the best coaches in league history were available. Bill Belichick, 71, got 1 interview. Pete Carroll, 72, got none. Then finally, after that, the average age of the 8 new head coaches, Mike McDonald, 36, Gerard Mayo, 37, Brian Callahan, 39, Dave Canales, 42, Antonio Pierce, 45, Raheem Morris, 47, Dan Quinn, 53, Jim Harbaugh, 60, is 44.8. And if Washington had landed 37-year-old Ben Johnson instead of the 53-year-old Quinn, that average would have gone to 42.8. So the reason I bring it up, before we pause here in a couple of minutes, is I don't necessarily think Bill Belichick was super interested in getting back into the game, and likewise for Pete Carroll. I mean, if Pete Carroll wants to be considered for a job, then there are teams that would have interviewed Pete Carroll. It's okay after elongated runs, as specifically runs where you've worked really, really hard to climb to the top and win Super Bowls. Okay, something unfortunate happens. Nobody wants to be fired or asked to leave. But, maybe there is self-awareness in a way they recognized, I want to be away from it for a year or so. And maybe they won't get back in. But I would think Belichick and or Carroll would be mostly comfortable with that. So I don't know what you think, man, but I've just never really thought of like ageism or age discrimination being a situation with these older coaches potentially looking for jobs, because these teams have the right to look at these younger coaches. We have one here in Kevin O'Connell, and ideas that A, are different than those who had done it for 20 years, and B, one of the real underrated facets of successful head coaches this day and age is how they work with this generation of human being. You understand what I'm saying?
I do, and that's, adore Florio, absolutely. But this to me kind of feels like you and I sitting together and thinking about the most obscure and outlandish idea for a Vikings trade or something. Again, the idle hand philosophy that right. I feel with the way we're analyzing our team, and with a lot of people just kind of, post Super Bowl, pre-combine, pre-draft. Let's throw some talkers out there. Simultaneously, the idea of, we know that this is a habit league. We know that this is a copycat league. Yeah. We know that this league rides trends and waves, and it should shock nobody that for a Bill Belichick who hasn't even been to the playoffs since 2019, that there's some disgruntled parts of that organization, quarterback issues, all of those things, that teams didn't immediately run and clamor for his services. Long tenured. You're going to have to do a ton of adjustments, including GM and personnel. And you're really handing over a lot more than just a job to Bill Belichick. And in some ways, similarly with Pete Carroll, where John Schneider is the GM, but Pete Carroll's had his hands in every bit of that Seahawks organization. These are guys, and then not just an age thing. I mean, in any aspect of life in the career world, if a guy's 70 and wants to work, I absolutely support that guy having an opportunity to do it. But right. In the same way that technology changes business processes, the efficiency of industry, similarly, the players change, the generations change, the needs change, and older Americans, older anybody, are always going to have a tougher time adjusting and meeting those needs as things change. So, whether it was here with Zimmer and we're, that conversation piece, and you nailed it. The ability to accommodate and connect with a younger and a completely different player than when Zimmer started his career, just hammering on the eardrums of the Larry Browns and Deion Sanders of the world. It's different now, and it's different for Belichick. So I don't look at it as ageism. I look at it as evolution. That's just kind of as basic as I can put it, I think, from my point of view.
Well stated. And if the Minnesota Vikings are looking to get younger at quarterback, selecting one at or around 11 definitely could be the bill of fare in 2 months and change. Now, with Bob Wischusen, the Vox for the New York Jets, kind enough to join us to talk about the Jets at 10. And he didn't make it sound like they were super interested in a quarterback at 10, where if you want one and you're the Vikings, like, yes, because of the trade up situations that I believe are going to have to take place to get a certain quarterback. But what about 12? And with yours truly in Denver and in Colorado doing the radio show from the Heritage Piece KOA, what about those Broncos at 12? Let's discuss that and much more with Brandon Krisztal at BK Denver Sports when 9 to noon continues.
On the Fan.
Here comes BK, Brandon Krisztal at BK Denver Sports via the tweet machine. He's a sports anchor and reporter for KOA Radio. And this family here, this iHeart family here in the Rocky Mountain region. And he's also a father for his daughter, Scarlett, 3-year-old beautiful daughter with those beautiful braids in her hair. She's here with us, too. And BK Denver Sports is here to amplify 9 to noon, which is 8 to 11 Denver time. What's up, my brother?
So I told some friends in Minnesota to tune in for some high-quality entertainment, which I'm expecting you to provide. I'm just going to tag along. But the great John Randall, who I missed in Vegas last week, but going to see him in Indy next week at the Combine.
Oh, really?
He does so much stuff with the Legends community. My friends Patrick and Susan, born and raised in Minnesota, love the Broncos. Their whole house is Broncos. They came out for a Broncos game this year. And then one of my fraternity brothers, Jesse Keybort, of Daniels and Keybort law firm fame.
Right. And when you say fraternity brothers, that would be the Kansas Jayhawks.
Exactly.
And a long-time friend of mine, I mean, I've called Vikings games 22-ish, something like that. So about 2 decades, media relations guy John Ekstrom is from He's from Kansas City, or at least that area, and he loves the Jayhawks, man. Mario Chalmers go crazy. Jock Vaughn go crazy. Grady Dick go crazy. But it's like watching the Jayhawks this year, like watching the Kentucky Wildcats. I mean, a couple of blue bloods. Now, Kansas is better than Kentucky. But I've watched Kansas play 2 times. One was what's the most recent loss?
They lost to TCU.
That's what it was.
Big Monday. Was that last week?
There you go. Okay, it's a loss to TCU, and it wasn't great. But the other time I watched them, they were playing this ballyhooed Houston team on a Saturday, middle of the afternoon, cornfields, and I'm like, I'm texting Ekstrom going, if your squad plays 96%, 92% as good as what I'm watching right now, ain't nobody in this country going to beat that team.
They have a high ceiling. I saw where Seth Greenberg said they have the best starting 5. Their shooting is an issue, but every one of these teams, I mean, the Final Four last year, as cool as it is to see Florida Atlantic or Miami get there, to make it the event we want it to be, you need a blue blood or 2 also sneaking in there. And I get UConn obviously winning it. I'd love to see Kansas and Phoenix. It's the same weekend as Rockies opening weekend here at home.
Oh, wow.
I'll happily miss that to go see my Jayhawks down there. And then our pal Bob Hagan, saw him briefly. His Iowa State squad, I mean, the Big 12's loaded. So he was in Vegas last week, and we didn't talk much, but Iowa State obviously put it on Kansas a few weeks ago where KU was a road dog. And we know Hilton's tough, but the Big 12, it's fun to watch for sure. So many KU alums are there in the greater Twin Cities area.
All right, I mean, legitimately, be BK Denver Sports anchor / host / reporter, or maybe you're going to bet your money here, as opposed to tried and true alum, and you just love the team inside and out, like winning the national championship. I mean, what, chip chair chance, or they legitimately have a good chance?
No, I think they have a good chance because, especially if they're running their stuff the right way, you've got a point guard in DeJuan Harris, who was a point guard on a championship team just a couple of years ago. Hunter Dickinson, I talked to a couple of basketball people, and I said, is he the next Nikola Jokic? Kind of kidding.
Oh, wow.
And basically they said, no, if he was a pro, he'd be in the pros. He's a very good college player, kind of like Zach Edey, who is a dominant college player, but not share their game translates to be a star at the next level. Doesn't mean they won't be on NBA rosters for a decade, but think about our guy Frank Kaminsky from Wisconsin, right? You're like, look at this guy. It's going to translate for sure. And he's been at the end of the bench and playing in mop-up time for me. But he can't start, certainly not for the Timberwolves, who are going to give the Nuggets a run for their money, I think, this spring if they match up in the playoffs.
Yeah, that and I was chatting with an NBA mind named Dane Moore, who does really good work earlier, and that's the barometer for me. And yes, I believe the Timberwolves can get to the NBA championship. But I mean, let's give the Wolves home court, okay? I mean, until hearts can get wrapped around, do you truly believe you can beat Jokic in a 7-game series? That's the barometer for me. I mean, Jamal Murray, obviously off on the side, and who's going to check him? And Jamal's the bomb. And Porter and Gordon, specifically Porter, and the way he plays in the postseason. Yeah, I mean, I still believe that's absolutely the target at which to shoot for sure. Funny, it's the champs, but the Timberwolves are legitimately better, and this is a legitimately top 3-ish, top 4-ish team in the game.
Well, and when you're getting the performance that you got from Karl Anthony Towns this year, and then Gobert defensively, and if they're both healthy, they create the biggest problems for the Nuggets. I mean, obviously, it was only a 5-game series in the first round, but matchup-wise, as good as Kevin Durant, we know Booker was banged up by the end of that Sun series. They sweep the Lakers with LeBron and AD, but not a lot of real help. I know they've got nice players around them, but not real help. With Anthony Edwards and then the two bigs, but Anthony Edwards is a certified star, right? Is where he ranks on best wings in the league. We can do that all day, but he is a tried and true all-star that will be in that game for a decade and can carry you in the postseason. We saw some of those great performances in that first round series, lost to the Nuggets. I know this. If I'm the Nuggets, I'd rather play the Lakers and maybe even the Suns again before I want any piece of the Timberwolves.
All right. Well, Gobert's the key here for the Wolves. I mean, he should be favored to become Defensive Player of the Year for a 4th time. Finch, he floats. I mean, it's expecting Rudy or anybody to run around with Jokic. I mean, that's minimizing what Gobert does defensively. So it's like, here he is on Jokic, and here he is on this guy, and he just kind of floats around, and that's really, I mean, we're close to a year removed from the Timberwolves pushing for the postseason. They have a home game, and Rudy Gobert punches teammate Kyle Anderson on the bench during the game at home, right in front of the fans. So, I mean, the metamorphosis of how that whole thing has changed has been incredibly impressive. Now, from the NBA to the NFL, I assume you're going to the NFL scouting combine, right?
Yeah, I will be there Monday to Saturday.
Monday to Saturday.
Well, because early in the week, you've got the coaches and GMs maybe talking, maybe not, and then you get into the prospects. But the best stuff that I've been able to get in terms of talking to people, establishing relationships happens Thursday night and even more so Friday night, because by then everyone's kind of let their hair down. They're worn out. Talk to most of the prospects. Yeah, there's some more coming, but honestly, Friday is when I've had the best nights, even though I've had plenty of good nights there. You know how it is. Just getting to talk to people and getting to know them a little bit without a microphone or a recorder in their face, just getting to know them like humans, which I know is weird for some people in this business.
Right.
But yeah, so the week in Indy, I hope it never leaves Indy, and it's one of my favorite weeks every year.
So I mean, is your goal, and I'm glad you went down the road you did about getting to know them so they can trust you, specifically in your role, man, because you break news. You know, but it's establishing that trust for, as we say, quote, background, end quote. I mean, how much does that help you with free agency and the draft?
It helps a lot, especially with the draft, because I'll ask people around the league that are in the personnel departments just where they have a player, what they think of them. And they know that I'm not going, even though I work in Denver for the Broncos flagship, I also do work with Fox Sports Radio. They don't expect that if they give me an evaluation, and it's going to be raw, it's not going to be like, I like this, this, and this. But if they give me some sort of honest assessment, and we know that it's the lying season really starting now. Yeah. I look back, I think I'm the first person that called it that. I know it's a weird claim to make, like George Costanza saying he coined the term, pardon my French, to a girl. But no one else had lying season in a tweet prior to me a few years back.
Yeah.
So you can only trust so much. But if you're not worried about what they're doing at the top and you just want an evaluation of, hey, what do you think of this receiver from this school? Or what do you think of this guard? And that becomes invaluable. Or a guy ends up here in Denver that played somewhere else or that played against him. I can get an honest assessment so that I know what the league thinks of the guy. Was it a fair market deal, this and that? So it's not always what's going to happen. And, you know, agents can be helpful with that. But my name's not Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, and I don't pretend that it is. So it's just good to have those relationships. Also, people change teams, they change jobs, and they may end up in your division, or and I'll see them a little bit more here when they're playing the Broncos. So the value in just creating relationships, and you don't know when a guy you meet is a good dude at the bar hanging out or whatever, or just shooting the breeze, becomes an offensive coordinator in a couple of years.
Yeah.
I've told you the story. I've talked to Kevin O'Connell, and I saw Scotty McKnight, who we were with the other day. Scotty McKnight is Mark Sanchez's best friend, was a great receiver at CU, walk-on that turned into a scholarship, all-time leading receiver when he left. Couple of years with the Jets when O'Connell was there, back in markup. So we're at the Senior Bowl, and Kevin's just got let go by the Washington football team, whatever they were called then.
Yep.
And he's telling us, and it's whatever. He's like, I don't know if I'm going to stick with coaching. Well, he ends up not only going to the Rams, 2 years later, he's the coach of the Vikings, and in year one, they're in the playoffs, and certainly competitive. And I've reminded Kevin, I'm like, dude, it's so crazy that you were contemplating moving on to a guy that is not only going to be a head coach, hopefully in Minnesota for a long time.
Yeah.
But even if it doesn't work out, it feels like he will be an NFL coach for 20 years if he wants to be.
Right.
He's got that makeup. And
I
was told he blew the doors off the Broncos here, even though he was their 9th of 10 interviews that round when Hackett got the job a couple of years ago. But so those are the types of things that happen at things like the Senior Bowl and the Combine.
Is that with the Broncos, is that just, like not hiring O'Connell and then hiring Hackett? Or it doesn't even have to be Hackett. It could just be somebody else who didn't work out. Has there just been a string of events where it's like, you had so-and-so here, you went with somebody else. You did this with Russ, now Russ is going to be gone. It's like, a left turn was obvious to many, but they went counterculture, so to speak, and made the right turn, and then the car wrecked.
Well, so it was kind of a domino effect, right? When Peyton Manning retired, and he was at the end of his rope physically, I think everybody saw that, they then thought they'd have Brock Osweiler. He was so frustrated by how things went at the end of that season, even though they won a Super Bowl, that he was benched in that final game.
Was he a second-round pick?
He was a second-round pick in the same draft that Russell Wilson and Kirk Cousins were in.
Wow.
He was, and not only was he a second-round pick, I think he was the guy that was going to be circled anyway for John Elway in that draft in 2012. Now, that's the year they got Peyton Manning. But he was, because Brock was roommates with Jack, so he thought he'd seen him, he knew him. Jack is John's son at Arizona State. He was a backup quarterback there for a little while. That was going to be his guy. And so that way it's a second-round guy that can compete with Tebow if they don't land Manning, and then he'll end up winning the job over Tebow, and that'll allow John to move on from Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
So they had Brock. Brock's there all those years. He then plays well. They go 5-2 in his 7 starts. That last one, they got the win against the Chargers, and they obviously Peyton does enough to get them with a great defense to a Super Bowl victory. So his agent, Jimmy Sexton, they decide, apparently this was how the story goes, he turns to Brock's wife at that Chargers regular season game and says, don't worry, we won't be here next year. And then the way negotiation went was they called the Broncos, asked for, and I'm getting way into the weeds on this, but they said, what's your best offer? And John says, $64 million, $34 million guaranteed. Okay, thanks. He calls back and says, well, the Texans are giving him $68 million, $38 million guaranteed. See you later.
Yeah.
And that was it. It wasn't, well, do you want to match that?
Right.
It was, what's your best offer? Oh, well, the Texans did better. See you later. So now they're scrambling. They end up trading up to get Paxton Lynch, which they weren't the only team trying to do that. Apparently the Chiefs liked him too. And had the Chiefs done that, then maybe Patrick Mahomes goes somewhere else.
Right.
But so since then, you
get Drew Lock.
But then a year later, you go from Gary Kubiak to Vance Joseph, who you hired instead of Kyle Shanahan.
Oh.
And it wasn't because Kyle didn't blow him away, because he did.
Wow.
It was that there was a strained relationship with Mike Shanahan and Joe Ellis, the team president at the time and the de facto owner.
Crazy.
And they just didn't know if they wanted Mike around as much as they thought he might be. Turns out Mike's not around very much in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Does he have an iPad where he can watch practice and check in on the meetings? Maybe. I haven't confirmed that, but there's a prevailing rumor. So that was one of the bigger ones. So then you go from Coobs to a first-time head coach in Vance Joseph.
I see.
He doesn't get to pick his assistants. So there's that. So he has Mike McCoy coming in.
Oh, wow.
Right. So then after a couple of years of Vance, then you go to another first-time head coach, Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
Finally getting his shot, a lifelong defensive coordinator. That doesn't really work out. 2 offensive coordinators in his couple of years, or I guess it was 2 and 3 years. And then Hackett blows him away in the interview.
Yeah.
We know that doesn't work, and you've got Russ and all of that. And now here we are with Sean Payton, and I don't know. We can play guess who that quarterback will be next year.
Right.
I don't think it'll be Russ.
Well, that's all amazing. I know how you laid that out. Now, the Broncos and the 12. All right, our squad, the Vikings, right in front of the Bronx. Any quarterback-related opinions at this stage of the equation? Obviously, with the right to change it, the closer we get to the draft. Any steam you can share at this point? Because I mean, I absolutely believe the Broncos take a quarterback with their first pick, and just being here a few days, I'll let you go first.
Well, so Sean Payton made the rounds on behalf of Zebra Technologies. That's the folks that power Next Gen Stats. And folks don't know this. Sean Payton was the first person to use Next Gen Stats for tracking practice, movement, all this. So he's on Kay Adams' show, and name a show he was on at Super Bowl, a big national show, Fox Sports with Doug Gottlieb. And he kept saying, I don't even know any of the quarterbacks' jersey numbers, right? We saw that clip over and over. Like, that was his talking point.
Yeah, right.
I think they have several plans laid out. I don't think they've picked their best plan, but I want to throw this back at you. One, I want to ask about Kirk Cousins, but two, whether it's the Vikes at 11 or the Broncos at 12, I've always had this thought that if there's a quarterback you like, I don't want you to hope he gets to 12. I want you to trade with the Jets at 10, or with the Bears at 9 on their second pick, and it ends up maybe costing you something. But say, there's a guy I liked enough. I couldn't believe that they made it even to 6 with the Giants.
Yeah.
So I'm jumping to 6. I don't want you to sit back and at 12, sort of like the Patriots, I think, did with Mac Jones, right? He fell to them like, okay, we'll take him.
Yeah.
And I know it's not a good example, but just that, even if you have one spot, if the Vikes are re-signing Kirk, right, or whatever, just to flip that one spot so nobody else can jump in front of you. Because I just don't know if they've identified what their plan will be.
Whether the Vikings re-sign Kirk, I still think it behooves them to get a quarterback on a rookie deal and have it be a first roundish quarterback. In this, you go to the combine every year, man. I mean, just listen to the way Brandon Krisztal at BK Denver Sports is laying things out, man. I mean, this is an elite football mind here, and so therefore into the combine 2020, we're there right before the pandemic hits, and all we're hearing is greatest wide receiver draft in the history of the NFL. And we're veterans, man. Specifically me, I'm kind of like, I got to pump the brakes on that and watch him 25 before I can say greatest ever. That's where we got Jefferson. Judy maybe hasn't been great here, but he's been good, or so on all the way through Darnell Mooney in the 5th round. Heard the same thing last year about the tight ends. And now you're watching Dalton Kincaid and Musgrave and Tucker Kraft and so on. So it was
Sam Laporta had a pretty good rookie year.
That's the A topic. Yeah. Laporta in our division, the A topic. So, okay, that looks like it's going to work out. Hearing the same thing about the quarterbacks this year, that it's high end good with 5 of them, 5-ish of them, and that they're going to be about 7, 8, 9, 10, that if they're in the right systems, they might all work. So with that said, I believe, Sean Payton at the end of the equation, in his quest to get the next Drew Brees, and that makes sense, then you need a quarterback coming out of a pro-style offense. You need a quarterback with a strong arm. J.J. McCarthy from Michigan is the one that I believe if they drafted right now and everybody had to stay in their spots, if he didn't go ahead, they would take him at 12. What do you think?
I think you're probably right, and I think the more work they do on him, even with Jim Harbaugh's hyperbole saying he's the best quarterback in the draft, he may end up being right. He's got a 50% chance either he's right or he's wrong.
Yeah, right.
And that's not really how that equation works. But you certainly like the raw skills, and you realize that they ran the ball and played such good defense that they didn't need him to do much. But when he needed to make plays, similar to what we saw with C.J. Stroud last year, he was my favorite quarterback in the draft, mostly based on what we saw in the bowl game in the playoff game, lost to Georgia. Like, oh, he can run a lot more when they let him. Ryan Day didn't need him to, so there's no need to expose him. And then we saw maybe the best rookie season since Andrew Luck or Justin Herbert or go down that list. But he's certainly in that category of, okay, let's wait and see. This guy might have it. Quickly on the quarterbacks, though.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that this is now 2024 and we still don't have, even with 360 million Americans, 32 good quarterbacks in the NFL blows my mind. We can name all the great quarterbacks ever. Yeah. In about 90 seconds. You've been watching football your whole life. You've been calling Vikings games for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
You've had some players you like, and you've had guys with great performances like Case. They've never had, Fran Tarkenton was their last great Dante was good, right? We can go through that. Randall, whatever it may be.
Right.
Kirk at times. You've never seen it, right? Look, especially when you look at what Wayne Larrivee gets to call with Hall of Famer to Hall of Famer, and now we'll see about Jordan. But my point being, we can name all the great quarterbacks ever. And the good quarterbacks, the Boomer Esiasons and Randall Cunninghams, we can throw them in pretty quick. And then you get to now, with all these guys that have retired, or Aaron Rodgers being the asterisk, but Tom's gone, Peyton's gone, Rivers, Eli, whatever. But they're all gone, Big Ben. It's Patrick Mahomes for sure. Talking about those football people that I've gotten to meet. Yep. They've got Joe Burrow second. And then your next group, the next group has Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson,
Herbert.
Maybe Jalen Hurts, maybe Herbert.
Yeah.
Then you've got the Lawrence and Dak's probably below that. But Deshaun Watson, they all, and now CJ Stroud, I'd even put in that group of, let's see, he's trending even after a year. But that's the point.
Yeah.
And everybody else is, okay, well, maybe we can win with our guy.
Right. Yeah.
And so even if these 5 or 6 are good, go back to that draft with Lamar Jackson, where he went 32nd, and Josh went 7.
Look at the Rams winning it with Stafford at that stage of his career. So
I guess he's in that weird.
But that's an outlier.
And Stafford probably is in that middle tier where he can. Yeah.
The Cousins tier.
Yeah, for sure. And because he has the ring, I guess you have to put him a little ahead of it. But that when things are going really good and you got everything good around you. But I'm with you. You still, if you have a chance to take a first-round quarterback, I think you do it every year until you've got the guy.
NFL draft, and much more with Brandon Krisztal at BK Denver Sports. He's an anchor and a reporter for KOA Radio. And the final segment for yours truly today from Denver, back to the Twin Cities and available via the free iHeartRadio app is around
The Fan.
Final segment brought to you in part by Casey's. Whether it's the wrap most days or days like today, final segments, Casey's. Stop in, get Casey's rewards, free coffee on Mondays. You already know that, but deals on food and fuel. The large one-topping pizza, buy that, get the second one half off. Stop into a Casey's today.
KOA and iHeart sports anchor and reporter Brandon Krisztal at BK Denver Sports, wrapping up this Tuesday, this Talker Tuesday with yours truly, Paul Allen, from KOA Radio. We're at the Heritage piece again, and they're nice enough to let yours truly do 9 to noon from here. We thank Brandon, Shannon Scott, Chad Bauer, and of course Nordo back at FM 100.3 KFAN for facilitating and making it so comfortable. Now the Broncos are they're like minus 25, minus 30 million against the salary cap. I mean, that's obviously a problem. And the Russell Wilson situation, wherever that goes next, forget the salary cap piece. We're in deep stretch. If somehow Russell Wilson ended up being a Vikings quarterback as a bridge quarterback 2024, how do you think that would work out?
I think I think any quarterback situation he ends up with where the play caller understands, let's maximize what he does with the play action, with the boot game out on the edge, which is just not what Sean Payton wants to do.
Yeah.
They're all rooted in the West Coast offense, but the zone running stuff that Kyle Shanahan runs because of his dad and because of Bobby Turner and because of the late Alex Gibbs, that would be a good fit for him. He's not likely going to San Fran. With Arthur Smith now calling the offense in Pittsburgh, that feels like the perfect kind of fit with Mike Tomlin, a strong head coach. You're just going to say, hey, this is how it is, a really good defense. But when you look at the pieces Minnesota has, and with Justin Jefferson able to stretch, plus you get Jordan Addison and obviously Hawkinson, and I think you need to maybe look at a running back boost, perhaps, to mix in with Madison and the other young kid. I think Minnesota would be a great fit, and you're going to get Russ for $1 million, 1.2. No one's going to pay it over. Yeah. And even if they incentivize it with, you get another $500,000 if we win the division, $500,000 if we make, or whatever, $1 million make the Super Bowl. That doesn't count against, because those are bonuses. That doesn't even count against the cap. They'll work the rest of the cap stuff out. It just seems crazy you're going to pay him $39 million to not be here, but that's how it's looking.
Hey, BK, what's up? What's the Boulder buzz around here with Dion now that he and the team legitimately have been humbled?
I think that I hope he sticks around for a while. It's cool that they got the best lineman prospect in maybe decades, years, whoever you want to ask. Shador looks the part. A lot of people think he could be the top quarterback taken next year, could be number 1 overall. Travis Hunter is as good as advertised and probably should try to play both ways if the right team and right coach will let him.
Pat Shurmur, offensive coordinator, expect them to run markedly more than they have the last 30 years.
No doubt. And Pat and I know Shador have a really good relationship, because one of Pat's main responsibilities before they put him on the staff full time to call plays was just kind of helping consult and spending time around Shador, getting him ready for things he's going to need to do at the NFL level. And so I think that Pat will be good for him. No one's going to accuse Pat of being the most creative play caller ever, but you don't necessarily need that when you have really good talent. And with the wideouts they have, with the running backs they have, if they can just be solid up front in a Big 12, where, of course, my Jayhawks are my favorite. I don't know if they're the actual favorite, but they're going to be good. We only lost 4 guys in the portal with Lance Leipold there.
Jeez.
So they're going to be competitive. Oklahoma State will be there, TCU.
Yeah.
And my guy, Sonny Dykes, who was my high school running backs coach.
Wow.
A million years ago.
Holy cow.
Yeah, his dad didn't want him to start right at Tech, so he came to high school for 1 year.
Yeah.
And then went back to
because he knew how to follow the good talent. Now, we have a minute and change left, Max. When it comes to the Avalanche and the Nuggets. Which team do you think has a better chance to hoist a trophy and why?
Probably the Nuggets because of Joker. The Avs...
McKinnon has a point in 26 consecutive home games. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's now second only to Gretzky, who did it 40 of the 41 home games in 88, 89. How about that? He passed Bobby Orr.
Yeah.
Look, McKinnon's awesome. McCarr's awesome. Their depth around them is good. Their goaltending's been good. But because Joker is such a cheat code with the way the NBA is, if they're healthy again, with Jamal Murray, with Porter playing the way he does, like you mentioned earlier, I would bet it's the Nuggets. But we're going to end up with one of these years where both of them make a deep run, and I'm just going to be living at Ball Arena until well into June.
Is the Buffs women's basketball team ballyhoo? I mean, is it like a super good team? I don't know where it's ranked now.
They just dropped
like top 10.
They just dropped to 11. No, they were as high as 2 or 3.
Oh, wow.
They beat defending champs LSU, and they've had some good wins. They lose to UCLA, bounce back to USC, but then they lose to Oregon State. 2 more quick shout-outs. Justin Bauer got in the car with his folks, and then my guy Andy Strauss, one of my other fraternity brothers, his dad Jerry Strauss used to come in.
God rest his soul.
And talk to you all the time.
Barrister's Brunch, first guest in the history of my radio career.
All the way going back to something related to Courtney James in 1997.
Something like that.
So
I'll see you in Indy next week.
Can't wait.
Stop by, okay? That's Brandon Krisztal at BK Denver Sports. Once again, thanks to Shannon Scott, Chad Bauer here at KOA, and Nordo for producing 9 to noon. I'm Paul Allen. The program is next. Have a wonderful day.
If it's good news or money, leave a message.
Podcast today's Paul Allen Show, or back to previous show and interviews by going to the iHeartRadio app or KFAN.